So it was about, I think, 2018 or 19 when the COVID hit. And I was sitting at home, everything was closed, and I was like, okay, I was slowly getting more into a full-time Bitcoin education. And I was thinking, okay, I would love to set some milestone or a goal that can be somehow measurable. And why 100 million? Two reasons. One, because there's 100 million Satoshis in one Bitcoin. So I was like, I want to educate as many people as there are Satoshis in one Bitcoin. Like, that's a nice goal. And another reason was that it was so big that I needed to think differently about the whole thing. Having a complete different approach. So, and I put there year 2030, which I'm not sure if I can make it by that time. I said I'm gonna be happy if it ever happens in my life, but I'm still relying on the exponential function. So potentially the last 2 years will be the exponential will just kick in. But while I was thinking about it, it struck me that I need to think differently. And the approach I took was,
hi there, I have a quick favor to ask. Over the past few months, this podcast has had several thousand returning viewers and listeners, but over 75% of you haven't subscribed yet. If you're enjoying what I'm doing and find my content valuable, consider subscribing on YouTube or following me on your favorite podcasting platform. If you're listening to this on Fountain app, then feel free to boost the show. It'll go a long way in helping the podcast grow and spreading the message about Bitcoin even further. I truly appreciate your support. Now let's dive into this episode.
Welcome to Your Bitcoin Story, the podcast where we explore the fascinating and transformative world of Bitcoin. I'm your host, Gigi, and each week we bring you insightful conversations with the thinkers, builders, and educators shaping the Bitcoin revolution. Today we have an incredible guest joining us, Dusan Matuska. Dushan is a passionate Bitcoin educator on a mission to teach 100 million people about Bitcoin by 2030, with a bold vision to separate money and state. He's the co-founder of AmityAge, a global initiative creating impactful Bitcoin solutions. Through AmityAge Academy, Dushan is bringing Bitcoin education to communities worldwide, starting in Roatán. And with AmityAge Mining, he is spearheading sustainable Bitcoin mining projects in places like Paraguay and Ethiopia. Get ready for an inspiring conversation as we dive into Dushan's journey, his ambitious goals, and how Bitcoin is driving global change. Dushan, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Gigi. Pleasure to be here.
It's an absolute pleasure, likewise, to have you on, Dushan. I believe, the first time we actually met in person was close to 6 months ago now in Prague at BTC Prague.
You guys, Prague's next to the stage of Chain Duel. I think we were.
That's right. Yeah,
we playing Chain Duel there.
We both went into the Chain Duel. We both flew out like amateurs, but it was still fun. Chain Duel was a good one, but I wanted to give you kudos that you guys had. AmityAge had, I would say, the most original stage at BTC Prague. I think it was the second year that literally, no pun intended, the ship sailed back to the expo hall. You guys had a whole mini stage with education stuff. You had one of the most, I would say, interesting panels where you had Jack Mollers moderating a panel with future children, basically Daniel Prince's kids. And who else was there?
Samantha was there.
Samantha was there.
Yeah,
it was incredible. Like, seeing Jack in a different concept, he's not on a big stage. He's not in his empty closet, but he's on a stage moderating a kids panel. You had a podcast station, which was close to me, even though I didn't make use of it. I was there more networking, but you had it all. And of course, a lot of, there was a book launch as well. You all literally blew it out the water. So big congrats to you and the team with the representation at BTC Prague.
Thank you. Yeah, big kudos goes to my girlfriend, Diana. She was in charge of the whole logistics and preparation. So she put so much effort into it. Yeah, she was the captain of the ship. I'm just I'm just rowing and setting the sails. That's it. She's the one heading and telling where to go. So she did an amazing job, and we super enjoyed it. We had so much fun there, made amazing people. So BTC Prague is kind of a love brand for us. So every year that's the conference where we put all the effort, and we just super enjoyed.
So I guess we will be reuniting next June in Prague. Then I guess the ship's going to sail back.
Hopefully, we will see how the mining goes because the margins are getting tighter and tighter. So maybe there will be a little Titanic as well. We will see.
A little dinghy boat's going to come through, you know?
Little dinghy boat, probably maybe a dinghy boat this year because the next year. We will see. We will see how everything goes.
I don't know about the ship, but you're going to come, right?
Oh, yeah, of course. Of course. Definitely. I mean, during summertime, I spend my days and weeks in Europe. And then in between, mostly Central America, mostly, you know, Paraguay, Roatán here. So yeah, June, definitely BTC Prague.
Amazing. Well, there you go, guys. If you want to meet Dushan in person in Gigi, make sure to get your tickets for BTC Prague, and we'll definitely see you there in person. But let's hit it off with the show, as we do with all guests. Can you share, Dushan, your personal Bitcoin story? What first sparked your interest in Bitcoin, and where was that?
So it was in Slovakia, and my first touch was in 2015, but it was introduced to me by a friend of mine that was more into these multi-level projects, and he did some Ponzi's before. So whenever he told me about Bitcoin, I was like, nope, thank you. I don't want your Ponzi. This is shit. So I basically, if it would be introduced to me by somebody I trusted more, I think I would get so much sooner into it. But I ignored it for 2 years. So basically, I really got into it in 2017 when a friend of mine who was doing a website for our company came to our office and we were just chatting. And I asked him, okay, Peter, so how's life? And he told me, you know what, recently I don't do so many websites. I'm just, studying Bitcoin and learning about it. I'm like, oh my God, Peter, they got you as well. Jesus Christ. He was like, no. Let me tell you, it's different than you think. And he wasn't telling me about the whole price thing, but he was more telling me about how Bitcoin can really revolutionize the commerce and countries where money is failing, how it can really help people to store their wealth. So I was really interested into that, but still very skeptical. So I came home and I was like, okay, I'm going to do some research, but more for a reason that I wanted to disprove Peter. So the more I went in, the more I'm like, damn, this is interesting. Like, that really makes sense. So I ended my research at like 3 a.m. saying that, okay, damn, I need to go to sleep. And the next morning, I woke up, I called my colleagues in the work saying like, guys, I'm not going to work for a day, maybe for 2-3 days, because I want to study Bitcoin. They were like, what the fuck? What you gonna do? Like, no, I'm still gonna study Bitcoin. Just you can get by for a day without me. So I just jumped into everything I could find, videos, articles, podcasts. There was not so much resources in Slovak language at the time. So I was consuming everything that was on the English side of it. And man, that was my journey. So I got pretty quickly into the rabbit hole and never left it.
So I guess, well, I'm sure Andras Antonopoulos played a vital role in those early ages. I mean, with 17, as you said, there wasn't too much, educational content and like stuff that really kind of connected the dots.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's very relatable on mind as well. But I wanted to ask, so how did you steer it into education? Because there's so many things that you can do, getting into Bitcoin.
Mm-hmm.
May that be if you're a programmer, either contribute to the core or build something on top, like a layer 2 or whatnot.
Mm-hmm.
There's so many different factors, but education's one of the things as I mentioned it, sometimes it's not the sexiest of subjects, right? Because people think of education, it's boring, you're sitting in a lecture and you're being, lectured about something. But at the same time, I believe, even though it's not sexy, it's the most important, right? So you can't have something as the most important and the sexy in a single thing. But
yeah,
how did you were you passionate about education before you entered Bitcoin? How did you kind of find your way in there?
Yeah, so the education element came years before I really stumbled upon Bitcoin. And what got me into it was that I used to teach and tutor mathematics, physics, and English for some years. And this was basically my first, let's say, job or a way to earn money, because I was teaching my classmates mathematics, or older students, younger students. And this way, when my friends were, earning 5 euros an hour somewhere with the hard jobs, I was teaching for 20 euros an hour. And I loved the job. And I loved the whole element of explaining kind of difficult concepts to kids, and they were told by their parents and teachers that they don't have genes on mathematics, and they were getting the worst grades. So then the parents called me like, hey, Dushan, can you please come? They just need to pass the exam. That's it, nothing more. When I came there, I did a kind of little diagnostics with the kid. I realized it's totally not about the kid. It's about like the teacher is really not paying attention to them. He's really rude and everything. So just basically changed the view, how the kid looks at the math. And I just solved a couple of things with them, showed them different angles to look at it. And suddenly they were getting one of the best grades. And the parents were like, what did you do to my kid? I was like, I did nothing. I just showed them a different way to look at it. And suddenly what was the most inspirational for me was the kids were getting more self-confident with other areas of their lives, because suddenly they realized it's not about the genes, it's about the work you put in. And the parents were paying them more respect as well, which was beautiful to see as well. So those were the years. I was about 17, 18 around that time, where I was like, damn, I just really, really love this. So since that time, when I went from high school to university, I was continuously teaching math, physics, and English, and then I stumbled about Bitcoin years after it.
Amazing. Well, it's nice that you kind of transitioned. You found something you're truly passionate about, something you're really good at. Because I totally can relate to that, Dushan. You know, like with education, it's not so much like how much knowledge the teacher has; it's the approach that he has to teaching. And it should be teaching and not lecturing. A lot of teachers, they kind of just like are very aggressive, and they're like, "This is how it's done." You know, like learn it. That's why kids, I guess, today are to a large majority are uninterested in subjects, because it's just the approach is not right for them. And yeah, as you said, the parents, I can just imagine them. They're like, Dushan, like, did you give some magic potion to my kid? Like, he loves this subject now. Like, what did you do with him?
Yeah, man, it was really interesting, and it was happening with like every parent. Like they were, because they didn't have the genes on math, but it was kind of like they gave up on themselves to learn math. So they were thinking the same for their kids, and they kind of couldn't comprehend that the kid can be very good at math, right? So it was very interesting to watch the parents and kind of be humbled that their kids can really do it. So it was for me kind of like, I really also wanted to show the parents like, hey, I want to show your parent that you can really do that. So it was kind of also a motivation of a kid as well, like I can really do it. But yeah, man, there's also these statistics. I read it some time ago that the kids, mostly like from high schools, they go to universities mostly based on how good the teachers were at that school. So for example, if you had a great teacher, very passionate in physics, there's a lot of kids going to physics universities after it, not because there is some disproportionate ratio of people loving physics, but it's kind of like the passion that the teacher showed them and gave them, it drives them on. The same with biology or history, right? So it really, really depends on the teacher, how passionate they are, how well they can explain the subject, and it sets the kids for the life journey, right? Just because of one significant teacher in their life. So I think it's very important role in a life, and just give them the curiosity and not kill the curiosity. I think that's one of the best things the teacher can really do.
Nice. I like it. You kind of open up the doors for them, not slam it shut and say, you're dumb, you can't do it.
Yeah.
You don't have the genes for it.
No, yeah, of course.
So Dushan, so on the topic of education, I want to bring it up now to the big, very ambitious goal that you have, which I mentioned in the introduction, with your goal of educating 100 million people about Bitcoin by the year of 2030, which as of the time of this recording, we are closing 2024. At the time of the release, it'll be the first week or second week of 2025. We're 5 years away from this goal. But first of all, before you tell us how this goal is going, like, where did that idea come from to set yourself such a challenge?
So it was about, I think, 2018 or 19 when I was, I think it was when the COVID hit. And I was sitting at home, everything was closed. And I was like, okay, I was slowly getting more into a full-time Bitcoin education. But the world shifted and it was so unstable, unsure what's going to happen. So I was thinking like, okay, what's the next chapter of my life going to look like? And at the time, I had a construction company. So I was kind of deciding which way to go. But for me, it was very easily recognizable that I just want to do Bitcoin full time. And I was thinking, okay, I would love to set some milestone or a goal that can be somehow measurable. And why 100 million? Two reasons. One, because there's 100 million Satoshis in one Bitcoin. So I was like, I want to educate as many people as there are Satoshis in one Bitcoin. Like, that's a nice goal. And another reason was that it was so big that I needed to think differently about the whole thing. Having a complete different approach. So, and I put there year 2030, which I'm not sure if I can make it by that time. I said, like, I'm going to be happy if it ever happens in my life, but I'm still relying on the exponential function. So potentially the last 2 years the exponential will just kick in. But while I was thinking about it, it struck me that I need to think differently. And the approach I took was that during those years when I was in university, I was also teaching kids across Europe train the trainer academies. So how to train other skills, whatever it is, how to set up your session outline, how to work with the audience, how to do public speaking and all of it. And I was also teaching the public speaking skills. So basically what I realized is that there is a lot of Bitcoiners around the world that are great in Bitcoin. They are like super technical, knowledgeable, and amazing developers and Bitcoiners. But what they're lacking is the soft skill of communication, like how to communicate Bitcoin simply, efficiently, in a way that you're not going to let your students drink from a fire hose. Because I experienced it many times, amazing Bitcoiners just discouraging the newbies with a bunch of jargon, bunch of buzzwords, used in so many different ways that the newbies are like, oh my God, this is not for me. This is too technical. I will never understand Bitcoin. I go do something else. I think the problem is in communication. So what I realized that how I can help is creating a concept, how we can help teachers to get better at teaching, or how we can bring more Bitcoin educators to space. So Bitcoiners who are passionate about education, they would love to be around, but they don't know how, and give them the journey of like, hey, you can become a self-sustainable and full-time educator. And these are the steps that you can take. And this is the soft skill sparse that you can take. Because I understood that if I educate 10,000 educators, if I bring 10,000 educators to space, and each and every one of them will help other 10,000 people to learn about Bitcoin, suddenly we are at 100 million, which is much easier to do than just go me one by one to every kid. And another thing is that I realized Bitcoin education need to be decentralized. And for a reason that there are different cultures, there are different problems in the world. So the tool of Bitcoin is being used differently in different regions and contexts. And I saw it, for example, when in Czech Republic, there is a YouTuber named Kitsom, and he has almost 100,000 subscribers on YouTube, purely Bitcoin content. When there was this 2020 halving party, there were more people on his stream than on Pompliano's stream. Imagine the big Pompliano having worldwide English reach, and he has less people than the Czech guy.
Wow.
And I was like, damn. But why is that? Because he speaks the language of the local population. He understands the culture. He's one of us. So we rather go to him. And there's so many people that cannot comprehend Bitcoin in English language. They are from various countries. They are not super native. So I realized I would love to empower these local educators because they understand the problems of their surroundings, of their communities. They understand the cultural differences, the language differences, and everything. So it doesn't make sense, I think, to have one platform with English content or content in many languages, but kind of centralized in one point. But I think the people living in those areas, I would love to empower them and give them the tools, the skills, and everything. So this is kind of why we came to a concept called Bitcoin Educators Academy that we can talk about later. Yeah. But this is kind of when the number came in, when I realized I want to do it differently, decentralize it, and help with what I had knowledge about before, that I was teaching, soft skills, train the trainers, public speaking.
Quick interruption, folks, because your seed phrase deserves better than a napkin in your sock drawer. We've partnered up with Stampseed, the legends of professional grade metal stamping tools. Their patented tools are made from solid titanium, yup, the indestructible kind. You hammer your seed phrase letter by letter, so it's literally etched in stone. Well, titanium, but you get the idea. No loose pieces, no oops, my letter shifted around, and 0 points of failure. Perfect for wallets, multi-sig setups, or if you're planning to pass your Bitcoin empire to your kids. Mount it to a wall, stash it under a desk, or hide it like a treasure map. Use code BTCStory for a 15% off site-wide discount, because your seed phrase shouldn't be left to chance. Visit stampseed.com and order your personal stamping kit today. And now, let's get back to the episode. It's interesting that you said, setting up such a big goal, it makes you think of different ways, because no matter how much you love teaching, doing a one-on-one or even like a class of 20 or even let's say 100 people, there's only 365 days in a year and you're not going to be teaching every day. So there's no way to do it solo. But the approach that you did was kind of, figuring out a system, giving the tools to other educators to go out and populate in their own native language. Because as you mentioned, yes, to a certain extent, we're all the same. We all need water, bread, a roof over our head, but we're at the same time very different. And we have different problems and we interpret different things differently. We have different economic classes. Someone, in a third world country getting $100 a day may feel like a king. Someone living in New York or LA, dollars a day will feel powerless. And it's the same globe. And I love this approach because you mentioned one important factor, which I think most people don't know, that most education, not even just Bitcoin related, is all in English, right? And people say, English is the most used language, but people don't realize I think it's about 10 or maybe at tops 15% of the global population speaks English. That leaves a void of like 90 to 85%. Basically, the majority of people don't speak English. And if you're just catering in that one language that just caters to like 10% of the overall pie, you're missing out so much. So there's no way you can achieve, like in your case, a goal of 100 million in, even if it's in 2-3 decades, with just focusing on English. So I love the approach you did. You kind of really reverse engineered it of how to get it across and how to achieve it.
Thank you. And I mean, this is kind of the journey of last year, because we started the first Educator Academy, the physical one, in January this year in Slovakia. We already till this day did like 7 of them across the world. El Salvador, Czech Republic, Hungary, Switzerland, Germany. We are planning January in Italy, Edinburgh, and other countries. So this kind of the concept is kind of still fresh. So that's the journey on for upcoming years to go. But yeah, the language approach needs to be decentralized. And, I love what Plan B is doing. They are translating so much stuff on the Plan B Network Hub. Also, Me Premier Bitcoin, working with already about 30 countries around the world, translating the book to many languages. So I think this is the right approach to go. And we need to translate and empower, so many different languages. That's the way to go.
100%. You mentioned Plan B, which I'm really fond of. And first of all, I love Giacomo. He's one of my favorite Bitcoiners. For those of you who don't know who Giacomo is, go check out some of his talks. He does some of the most entertaining. He's one of the most entertaining people in Bitcoin, but super knowledgeable. And his latest, one of his latest projects with Plan B is just incredible. I had the chance going back to BTC Prague at their booth to have a chat and see what they're building out. It's very inspiring. And essentially, it's putting different components together that builds this master educator's machine. Because as you said, you bring in this whole skill set of how do educators go out and present it in an easy and understandable manner. But then the educators have this kind of big issue of, wow, now I've got this, vast amount of data that I need to compile into nice presentations, many videos. And that's where Plan B comes in. They're building essentially one of the biggest Bitcoin libraries of texts, educational stuff. They even have, I believe, quizzes where you can go out and do it. And everything is absolutely free. And they're translating it into, I think, I haven't checked it in the last few months, but last time I checked, they already had about like 8 to 10 languages. And I remember when I spoke to them, because where I'm living now is basically Russia. Like Russia has nothing with regards to Bitcoin education. Like it's such a big mass of people, but there's such a lacking of information. So I was asking them, I was like, do you have like Russian on the list? And he was like, not like in the next few months, but definitely Russia's there. He goes, we want to do it like translated to over 150 languages. And I was like, wow. I was like, that's basically like nearly the whole year, the whole world. So I was like, that's incredible.
I mean, right now I'm checking the website. There's 14 languages to choose from.
Okay.
Russian is there, but maybe not all the materials are in Russian. So maybe it takes some time to translate the materials themselves. But
amazing.
Yeah, man, it's interesting.
So
they do great work. They do great work.
And you know, once again, this whole FOSS system of, you know, open source, there's no license, you know, and Jack, even encouraged and Roxy, they were like, you know, go take the content and just go orange pill people. You know? That's what we're doing it for. And it's amazing because a lot of, like, I think why education previously was not so successful, this whole concept of like Udemy courses, you know, you create this course, you need to pay this upfront payment, and then you don't know what you're expecting. And in most cases, it's just fluff. And you kind of feel cheated. You paid whatever you paid, $5, $10, $20. Basically, you got nothing out of it. And education should be fun, and it should have a personal touch because, you know, I told you off the record, but I'm entering and I want to start doing education myself. And the reason I want to have a more of a personal touch, may that be physical workshops or one-on-one calls, is because everybody, once again, interprets different information differently, and everybody has questions. No matter how good the video is or how good the course is or how good the book is, there's a certain aspect you're like, but what about this? Like, it doesn't make sense. And if you have this opportunity of asking directly in that moment, not writing a note and going YouTube comments, you're probably going to be shilled some scam coin instead of getting the answer to your question.
Yeah, man.
It's a whole different approach, and it speeds up the whole process of you learning instead of doing it on your own. So I love what you're doing and other initiatives.
I did the same thing. When I was learning, I was so lucky that I had people around me. We had this community called Parallel Polis, which sprang up from Czech Republic. We set up the Slovak version. Maybe some of the listeners know it. We closed it when COVID came, but we were running it for 2-3 years. And the founders of that, I met there, Pavel Lupták, Juraj Bednar, which are kind of like the Czechoslovakians, legends in Bitcoin. Martin Haboušťák, one of the best developers I know. And I had the opportunity to ask them questions directly. So this personal touch is important. And the market says it's important because, for example, that was my full time for a few years. I was doing one-on-one consultations, setting up treasures, wallets, explaining the KYC, non-KYC approaches, self-custody, everything. So it was actually very hard for me initially to justify that I was getting paid for it. Initially, I was doing it for free. Actually, one of the best things I recommend people who want to enter the space of Bitcoin education is this. What I was doing for a few months is that I wrote a post on Facebook saying that every day from 3 p.m. to 5 p.m., I will be sitting in this cafeteria and I will be studying. This was during my university studies. But whoever comes there, I will talk with them Bitcoin and answer every questions that they have. So some days, nobody showed up. Some days, one person, 2 people. And every time they came, they had these questions and misconceptions and objections. And on some of them, I didn't know how to answer because I was pretty new in the Bitcoin at the time. But I always tell them, like, look, I don't know the answer right now, but I come home, I research it, and tomorrow I come with the answer to you. And this helped me to educate myself the fastest, the best, because I was going down the rabbit holes of various single aspects. So it jump-started my education journey, learning myself. And then people started to come for paid workshops or paid consultations. But it was very hard for me to justify that because I was like, all the content is free of charge on the internet. Right now with Plan B, with MePrepare, everything is free. So what I'm actually being paid for? And it took me some time to understand, okay, what I'm being paid for is that I'm saving time to a person. Because instead of them going to the internet, trying out for 50 hours, browsing something, going there, not working, and so on, I condense it to 3 to 4 hours. I call it Bitcoin Masterclass. It lasted 4 hours. And in that time, I explained them why Bitcoin. I set them up with an on-chain wallet, with Lightning wallet, with a Trezor, and show them the ways how to buy Bitcoin, why KYC is dangerous and so on. So in 4 hours, they got everything. And my goal was to kind of like set them up on a journey that they don't need me anymore after those 4 hours. And this was where I could really start to be a self-sustainable full-time educator. So coming back to your point, it's super important still, like this personal touch, even though we have everything open source and free on the internet, taking somebody, like having somebody to ask questions and somebody that distills everything, like saves you time and money in the end, that's what people are willing to pay for. And this is what I want to tell to the educators, like, don't be afraid to ask for money. Because if you ask for money and you are full-time educator, then you have more time for your own education. So people will come to you. This is why people started to come to me and not to some other people who are just kind of like in the evenings, they can do some education, because they were like, okay, Dushan is doing it for like full time. So he's in it. He's 24 hours, 24/7 in Bitcoin. So I'd rather pay him the money than somebody else. So it started this wheel, and I could really become the sustainable educator. So I try to encourage educators not to be afraid to ask for money, because they are trading their time, and there needs to be some value happening. Then otherwise you will not become full-time, and you cannot do it full-time.
Of course. And, I just want to add, which I think you'll agree with me, you're not just saving them time, but you're saving them wrong lessons. Starting off on your own, and if you want to put in a few $1,000s or pounds or whatever it is, and you go on some exchange and you buy it there, and then the exchange, rugs you. First of all, you lost all your money. Second of all, high chance you lost faith in Bitcoin. You're going to say, oh, it's just another, scam coin. You're basically saving them a lot of things. And, even charging a few $100s for a few hours of education, that saves you, first of all, time, but second of all, sets you on the right path. Because I think that's very important. And instead of like dabbling around and basically playing the casino, Bitcoin is not playing the casino. If you want casino, there's plenty of alts out there to play the casino, especially the meme coins. Bitcoin is taking sovereignty back into your own hands. And if you can do that in a matter of a couple of hours, 2-3 hours, it's a no-brainer to pay that money.
Yeah.
I want to bring up another thing, when you got started in 2017, which actually wasn't even that long ago. We're talking about like some 7-8 years ago. As you said, there wasn't that much stuff out there. And that's more or less when my journey started in August 2017. And I did kind of educational consultancy back in 2017. I was living in Cyprus, but it wasn't Bitcoin only, because I just got started. So it was called Universal Crypto. It was like consultations about all things crypto. And the reason I launched it was because there was nothing out there. Back then I was a financial analyst, and everybody was, talking about they want to trade Bitcoin, they want to trade Ethereum, it was the big pump of going into 20K. And I was looking for this educational consultancy to refer to clients, so, they'd learn about it. And I realized there's nothing out there. So I was like, hey, why don't I go? And I like day and night was reading about everything blockchain. And I remember the reason I did it, it didn't last long. It lasted about 2 years. But the point was there was nothing out there. And I can totally relate when you said kind of there was nothing out there. And we went so fast from this extreme of having, like a handful, like the Andreas Antonopoulos of the time in 17 to being in 2024/25, where there's like a plethora of information. You go on YouTube and you type in like Bitcoin or like anywhere, Reddit, and it's just so much noise. There's no signal. And it's like you go from this one extreme of like nothing to way too much to I don't know what's going to happen in the next 5 years. If people just keep on like putting out stuff, you people will be so like overwhelmed with the amount of information. So I think as more and more content gets pushed out there, it makes more and more sense to people take it seriously and give this personal touch where you're helping people basically, funnel through the noise and see the signal. Don't you think, Dushan?
Yeah, totally agree. Like the knowledge of navigation through all of it, I think it's super important. We will see if AI is going to help out somehow with that or not, but having this personal touch, somebody who went through the mud of all the content and he understands, okay, what makes sense, what doesn't make sense. And if you see that the person is really living that, so kind of living what they're preaching, that's kind of the person you want to, go to and maybe ask questions. Also saying, and what is great in Bitcoin, that Bitcoiners, they don't mess around. Like if they can call you out any day, they can slash the heroes, which is great. Because if there's somebody who tries to kind of take advantage of person not knowing too much, they very quickly can call you out. So there is, even in education, there is this kind of the power of the crowd, that you should be able to, you know, give feedback, or you should be able to have reviews and something like that. So we can, the good guys can stay in the business, and the bad guys can be rooted out if somebody want to scam you. Imagine here on the Roatán, just 1 mile from our Bitcoin center where I'm sitting right here, there was a church, and the pastor was basically shilling this Ponzi scheme, the crypto Ponzi scheme, to people. So imagine you're coming to a church, you know, and suddenly in the end of the preaching, you've been shilled some shitcoin Ponzi scheme, right? And they were claiming like, yeah, you can make 1% a day. And then so many people came to our Bitcoin center saying like, hey, I invested money here, and you know, but I cannot get it out. What happens? I'm like, damn. So I couldn't help them anymore. So it's very important that there are these market forces that can really weed out the bad guys. Just like in regular business, you know, if you're not doing your work good, the market will just not buy from you. You go out of business. The same, I think, should be happening in education, and in Bitcoin especially. People are very harsh, which is good in this sense.
I totally agree. Kind of, you know, Bitcoiners have this strong character of integrity, you know, like we really preach the truth. Essentially, Bitcoin to me is like the truth teller, right? Like the deeper you go down the rabbit hole, you start questioning everything you've been taught in your education, through your parents, through like everything, you know. Don't trust, verify. You want to, you know, make sure everything really as it is. And I agree. I think that's good. And, you know, slashing your heroes, I think that's a big benefit for us Bitcoiners, because, you know, especially some people get more successful, and, you know, they're NGUs, you know, numbers go up in their accounts, and they suddenly think, you know, oh, I can do this and I can manipulate here. Maybe you can for a short time, but long term, it's not going to last. And that's what I love about this community, that people like really speak the truth. And I wish more people, non-Bitcoiners, would be like that in real life, because now, especially, like, it's very hard having like a direct conversation with someone in public. It's like, oh, I'm going to offend them. And are they with this community? And what's their perception of this? I think that's really bad. And pronouns, is he a he, a she, an it? Like, what do I like? I find that bananas. Like, it's insane. And what I find even scarier, Dushan, is how quickly we went to this extreme. Like 10 years ago, you could freely like shoot the shit with anyone in the street, and you would not be, you know, scared of criminal prosecution or sexual assault. And now you're like triple, quadruple checking. What language should I use? And it's like, what the hell's going on, you know? And that's what I love in Bitcoin, is that it has this like pure filter. Like everybody, especially on X, it gets very exciting and very colorful language. Nostr is the opposite. Nostr is more like collaborative feedback, supporting each other. And then like X is like the ultimate showdown. It's like everyone's bashing each other. It's like the UFC versus like a jiu-jitsu, you know, like one's like total bashing cage fight, and the other one's about like, you know, submission, you know, like I'll tell you how it's properly done in a professional manner. But
yeah, that's a nice analogy used there.
Yeah. So I want to now divert it. So kind of setting up this course, which you did for 2 years, traveling to different countries, setting up, doing these workshops, how to train educators to go out and do their craft for their people. How did AmityAge Academy come about? Is this something that evolved out of that, or you in parallel started that? How did that story begin?
So the academy, it was very coincidental, that the physical academy, because this happened 2 years ago, 2.5 years ago, when I randomly ended up on Roatán. And why? Because our mining client, we do Bitcoin mining, and we started that about 3.5 years ago as a way to finance the education. We didn't want to be dependent on grant subsidies and some fundraising. So we wanted to kind of fundraise ourselves with something profitable. And with education, you know, it's kind of hard to get it profitable fast, because there's not so much money in education. So we decided to do Bitcoin mining for various reasons. That, you know, my co-founder's family member owned a power plant, little tiny one, but still it was a great way to start. And one of our mining clients at the time, he sent me a picture of a beautiful place with his family, you know, palms on the beach, having fun. And he said, Dushan, you need to come here. I'm like, what is the place? This is Roatán. It's a paradise. Where is Roatán? Is it Africa, Asia? I had no idea. No, it's Caribbean. I'm like, wow, okay, I'm a sailor for 20 years. I've never been to Caribbean. It's piracy and everything. I kind of love the topic, so why not? And he said, yeah, it belongs to Honduras. So I started to Google out, okay, Honduras, it's the most freaking dangerous country in the world right now. I'm like, Robert, like, are you safe there? Yeah, it's perfect. It's perfect. No, don't worry. Roatán is super safe. Okay, why not? So March 2022, we ended up on the island. And why even we ended up here? Because he told me, Dushan, you wouldn't believe there is a Czech village on the island. I'm like, what the hell are Czechs doing in Honduras? I'm from Slovakia. We used to be one nation before. So I'm like, I freaking need to see that. So we came in and we fall in love with the place, with people, with the atmosphere. And 2 days before I left, I was scrolling Twitter and there was something coming up like a Prospera summit. I'm like, what is that? I clicked it and it says this crypto city future of governance. I was like, I'm very skeptical, of these crypto projects. So I didn't give it like a big credit, but it said like tomorrow is the summit and it was 2 days before we were leaving or 3 days. So I was like, okay, I'm on Roatán. This is just next corner. I want to check it out. So I came there. I was really expecting, 5 people on the beach having fun, cheering for freedom. But I came in and there was this beautiful building came up, beautiful wooden structure, very artistic as a co-working space. There was a residential tower coming up, a factory coming up. And there were like 60 people. Some of them like very Bitcoin OGs. 2010, guy who was running the first ever talk show speaking about Bitcoin. He was interviewing Gavin Andresen, and actually it is said that Roger Ver heard that interview, and that's how he got into Bitcoin. So super OG shit. I was like, damn, this is interesting. And at that summit, we had an opportunity to pitch an idea that we would like to develop in this free private city. I'm like, okay, I have an idea in my mind for some years, the Bitcoin Center. So I pitched the idea. It was basically the idea coming from parallel polis in Czech Republic and Slovakia. And the guy sitting in the front row was like, dude, I love it. We would love to support you. What do you need? I'm like, probably a space would be nice. Okay, let me take you to a building. We have it ready. You can name your rent. And if you love it, you can start immediately to build your academy. I'm like, damn. And he took me to this place where I'm sitting right now is our tiny little studio we built here. And it's the highest viewpoint of the whole island. It's magnificent place. And he took me up on the deck. We spent 2 hours speaking about libertarian ideas, Ayn Rand, Atlas Shrugged, because this place was kind of inspired by Atlas Shrugged, Galt's Gulch, being kind of this safe haven for people to come and trade with gold, right? So I was like, damn, I want to be around and help building this place. I want to kind of be a co-creator and help with our Bitcoin knowledge. So I told my girlfriend, she was here as well. I was like, hey, Diana, can you imagine our next chapter in life to be in Honduras? And she was like, what the fuck? Like, Honduras? But no, in the end, she's just in the next room. She's working with our company, with AmityAge. She's doing amazing. So right now, part of the life we spend here, we built the center. We're educating the kids on the island. We onboarded almost 70 businesses to Bitcoin here. We have the only ATM on the island. So we're really painting the island orange day by day, doing Bitcoin diploma graduations or like the whole courses for schools. So day by day, we try to, do our work. Actually, after our podcast in 1 hour, I'm going to onboard another great business and one of the best Texas Mexican restaurant here on the island into Bitcoin. So amazing. Every day we do something to really prepare a place for people to come and just enjoy their life on Bitcoin.
Well, it's incredible. First of all, congrats on everything you're doing. You're really doing the God's work, Dushan, and setting the blueprints for other parts of the world to kind of see, like if Dushan with AmityAge can do that, we can do that where we are. It's not impossible, and it's incredible what you've done in such a short time.
Thank you, Gigi. That happened actually with the Bitcoin Bali House because they are doing such an amazing work, and they reached out to me, I don't know, a few months ago when they were just starting. They were asking some questions because they were watching what we were doing. So I tried to help them, like the lessons learned. But damn, man, they just overgrew us. They are rocking it. They do so many meetups, amazing place. regular, developers meetups and meetups for newbies. I mean, they are inspiration for me right now, right? So totally anybody can jumpstart a circular economy. Anybody can just do it. It's just really requires time, especially if you want to have a physical location. This is a next level problems you're gonna be having, because for example here we have a Bitcoin cafeteria as well, so we need to take care of the inventories and having a good food on a good level, having a good coffee. So suddenly the Bitcoin Center becomes a little restaurant and cafeteria. Plus we do education. Plus we need to run the ATM. So there's so many things on top of each other. But yeah, definitely it can be done, and I would love to encourage all the communities to set up their own little centers, something like Berlin is doing in El Salvador. They have amazing, beautiful education center, regular meetups. It's wonderful what's happening in the last 1 or 2 years.
And if you don't mind me asking, how big's the team? I mean, apart from you and your missus, I mean, how big's the AmityAge team who's doing the day-to-day tasks?
So the local team, it's 6 people. We have Ariana, she's the head of the academy, running the whole operations. We have Fidel, our Bitcoin educator. Manuela, she's in charge of the kitchen, food, and all of these things, and inventory, merchandise. And then we have 2 baristas, Shanti and Vencia.
A lot of coffee.
A lot of coffee, right? So yeah, this is the current size of the team. Nice. We might be hiring a new educator soon, so we will see. It really depends, how much work we have with schools, but it grows. Suddenly the schools are calling us that they would love to repeat the academies or repeat the Bitcoin diplomas. So I don't want Fidel to be the only one.
Yeah,
he's in charge also of the businesses. So yeah, there's kind of like a day-to-day operation. We pay everybody in Bitcoin, so that's kind of the rule here. Everybody's salary is in Bitcoin, and they can either spend it within the businesses or they can cash it out in our ATM. We have 0% fee for cash out, just to make sure that we support the merchants and our employees as well. So yeah, and we finance it thanks to the mining currently. And also we have OTC desk that we are building, so that helps us finance it. But if we wouldn't have some constant cash flow, I couldn't afford to pay the rent, to pay the electricity, to pay the employees. But I wanted to build it out in a way that it's sustainable, that it can really, people can work full time in it and not just like, okay, I have 1 hour time, I just go and do some work. No, this is kind of what was one of the problems of the parallel polis in Bratislava, that it was based on volunteers purely. So we burned out after 2 years, right? So we didn't have a kind of a succession strategy that today, if I would be building something based on volunteers, I would immediately think about how to make sure that,
not monetize, but how to sustain it.
How to sustain and how to do succession strategy on the people as well. So I will not be the bottleneck. But let's say every 6 months, there will be a process of getting new people excited about the project, replacing the roles, so it will not burn out on the volunteers that started that.
Yeah.
So these are kind of lessons learned we learned over time, and yeah, that's what we put into the practice.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with that, Dushan. Voluntary work is good and all. It's nice, but voluntary work doesn't pay the electricity bill at the end of the month, right? Like people still have fees, and in most parts of the world, this COVID hyperinflation that kicked in from all the money printing, people are really struggling to pay their bills. And as much as they would want to do something voluntarily, they just they can't economically, do it because they've got either so much debt or so many running costs that it's super important. And, that's one thing that I also deeply have been thinking about for the last few months, like FOSS projects, especially in the Bitcoin space, that rely primarily on, donations and grants and, with open sats and a bunch of other ones. But I mean, it's like, how sustainable is that in the long term? Like sustaining, waiting, like applying for a grant, waiting, are you going to get it? Are you not going to get it? Like, and I truly believe there is a solution. What that solution is, I don't know. And every case is different. But I think, people should, like, before they launch it, before they go full time into something, they should really focus about, like, how could we make this sustainable? And as you said, how do we make this system of bringing fresh new people to replace? Because if it's just one person, no matter coder, barista, whatever he is, working day in, day out for years, they're going to it's going to get to a breaking point. They're going to burn out. And then all that stuff that they built, all that proof of work is just wasted essentially. So
Yeah, exactly.
I think you mentioned a very important part there, Dushan.
And what I also tell to these projects, because sometimes I consult or mentor some new starting projects in Bitcoin, mostly education based, most like circular economies. And I try to tell them, like, not thinking about the monetization or succession is kind of irresponsible, because you're putting effort, as you said, you're putting effort, you're putting a lot of energy, you're kind of getting people in. And if you as a creator or the leader are not thinking about it up front, it's kind of irresponsible, because the project will can hit the wall in some time, and whatever you build by that time, all the hours and manpower that was invested can just evaporate like that. And that's very sad and irresponsible. So anything I would be starting today that I would say, okay, I don't want to do it voluntarily, it's a voluntary project, I would be like, okay, what I can do to make it sustainable, what's the value I'm giving to somebody that somebody can pay me for it? Is it a sponsor that can show his brand to some audience? Is it just a crowdfunding on Geyser Fund that's going to sustain me? What is that? Who's benefiting and who's willing to pay? Because if nobody's willing to pay, then the question is, are you really providing value? Or only you think you're providing value and nobody values it, right? So I think these are very important questions to be asking yourself whenever you're starting any type of project.
I like it. And you save them a lot of time, energy, and just resources. And the most important thing, I would say even more important than saving money, is saving time, right? Because we all have very limited amount of time on this planet, and you don't want to just go to waste, especially burning like years into something, and in the end it doesn't work out.
Yeah,
it's painful stuff. So
yeah,
I guess one lesson is to prepare for it.
Yeah, and one thing to add is that if somebody is, for example, educating, let's say, mid-premier Bitcoin diploma, right? And they don't have any business model, because it's kind of, you cannot ask money from kids. That's really, we don't do it here as well. We do everything for free in terms of mid-premier Bitcoin diploma. But we have something on the back, like mining, to sustain us. And I don't want to say that it's waste of time if you educate, let's say you educate 100 kids and then you close down the project. It's not pure waste of time, because you gave Bitcoin knowledge to so many people, which is amazing.
To the future generations, not just somebody.
Yeah, exactly, a future generation. So you did a wonderful work. I just want to encourage everybody who's doing this kind of education to really think about, okay, how we can make it sustainable, because that's super crucial.
Yeah, no, I agree. So I want to bring the conversation now to your part of making your efforts sustainable, which you mentioned with AmityAge mining, and kind of that's how it all started, your initiative of education, which in the beginning it was funding it. And I guess when you started the mining operations with your co-founder, it was a much more profitable time to mine Bitcoin than it is today. And you mentioned it briefly when we just kicked off this episode about, will the boat be returning to Prague next year? And you're like, I don't know, we'll see, because the margins are slim in mining. I want to hear firsthand, because there's been a lot of talk online about slim, like miners going out of business, big miners buying out other mining companies. But I want to hear it from someone who's, doing it themselves, not just, Twitter fingers, reposting stuff, but actually doing it on the ground. How are you experiencing the current change and what's happening, and especially with the fees? Maybe let's do that, and then I want to bring up another topic of Mempool. We're at 100K, and you can do a 2-sat VByte transaction, but that's a second question.
So touching the mining point, of course, we started at a time when the China was plugged out. So basically, we were enjoying the super low difficulty. I was recently checking when the price was about 60K. I checked that when we started, the price was roughly 30K. So it was kind of 50% of it. But the difficulty was like 7 times or 8 times smaller.
Wow.
Right? So there's a huge ratio difference of how the difficulty skyrocketed over those 3.5 years. And how price, it tripled since we started, which today it's so much better than a month or 2 months ago, right? So today's, I don't want to complain. We are happy, but was better times. And But yeah, as a miners, and especially after halving, we kind of expected the difficulty to drop, let's say 20, 30%. Didn't happen, just keeps rising, keep crazily rising. So the difficulty is really killing us, because combination of difficulty with the halving, it's cutting, it's slashing the profits critically. And suddenly you are in this race for lowest possible cost, which puts you to countries that you don't live at, that you need to build up some partnerships. Mostly there are countries which are not on the scale of Switzerland, like everything works and it's super tidy. You go to countries where you need to do trade-offs. Okay, so there are some risks involved, political, security reasons, security risks, and so on. The energy might be not super stable every day, 100%. And you're basically in this race to calculate your risks and the trade-offs, price of electricity compared to everything else. And it's tough. I mean, honestly, when we were getting in, it seems that, wow, you just plug in the machine and just going, right? Of course, it's never easy like that. Every business has its own nature, right? What was better than the business I had previously of the construction business, I was building workout parks and kids' playgrounds. It takes effort to even sell it first. Then you're building, there's some mess up happening, so your cost goes up, your margin is done. And then you're calling to a city hall, like, hey, can you pay the invoice after a few months? And then we plugged into machines in Slovakia, and like the Bitcoin was paying every day, a couple of times a day. I'm like, damn, this is beautiful. I don't need to call to somebody to pay my invoice. Yeah, that's the beautiful part. But then you cannot compete on the revenue side. So let's take a business like a marketing agency. The better job you do in whatever, you can charge higher prices, not in Bitcoin. The revenues, everybody has the same revenue. So you're only competing on the cost side. And then to really get a good cost, you need to work with economies of scale. So the big guys are getting bigger because they have the best deals on electricity, the best deals on miners. They lock the prices for long term. So it's very hard for us as a medium-sized miners to compete with that. So yeah, it's a tough business. Again, we are still continuing. We still go for it, but we are already building secondary revenue streams, just not to be purely dependent on mining. So that's one of the things we started to build is the OTC service desk. So we can help people, buy and sell Bitcoin for larger quantities. And we have here on Roatán a couple of Bitcoiners buying properties with Bitcoin. We help them to swap it for dollars, so the agency receive dollars. So that's something that really, again, helps us to sustain the education, helps us doing the mission. But yeah, the mining part, man, it's tougher. It's tougher. The difficulty is
it's not plug and play like people think.
No, totally not. Totally
it's
not.
It's not a BitAxe. On the topic of BitAxe, what's your take on kind of the growing trend on BitAxe?
I mean, I like getting back to the roots of home mining, just for the sake of people learning about mining.
My terahash to the network.
Yeah, that's the thing. I mean, the price per terahash, it's super high if you look at it from this perspective. You know, what we are paying for the big regular miners compared to the BitAxe, it's a huge difference. So those machines are crazily expensive per terahash, but you're buying an experience. You're paying for the experience. You're paying for learning something new. So it's an education tool, right? Yeah. And 100 of those, just cover, 1 3-year-old S19 of 100 terahashes. So you cannot be like, I'm helping the network to be more secure. Well, not that much, I would say. But maybe those people will learn, get excited, and then they set up their own mining farms. So it's a net positive. It's a hugely net positive thing. And I would love more home miners to come into the space, because I see it in the trend is that the big guys are getting bigger. So if somebody says, oh, but hash rate is not centralized, well, not that much, but it's getting slowly there, because it's not about a mining pool. So I don't want to talk about the pools because they don't own the hash rate. But if you look at the big guys like Marathon and Foundry, man, they are buying crazy amount of hardware, and that's undeniable. So Well, that is a part of centralization. So I would love more smaller, medium-sized miners to come up, even the home miners. In the end, the best case scenarios would be that everybody at home has their own miner. So that's the most decentralized mining network we can really have. So if BitEge is going to help with that, I'm totally up for it. We are actually running, the first miner on Roatán is running just next door in our Bitcoin center. We have the BMM, the Brains mini miner. So we are having it. It's also 1 terahash. We are running it on the lottery model. So trying to find the hash for the full block, right? And just it's kind of for education purposes, right? It's showing kids that it's possible. This is how it works. We're also running the little nerd miner here in the academy. But I don't assume I'm going to make money with that. It's just purely education and fun.
Amazing. No, I agree. It's if anything, if it opens up and kind of inspires people to go into, further mining at home, it's a huge thing. And if not, at least if anything, people feel like, they're getting that experience. And even though if it's not much, but still you can say, I'm not just a node runner, I'm also a miner runner, like I'm mining as well a little bit, even if it's a tiny dash.
Yeah.
If it's hundreds of thousands of people or maybe millions of people one day, it's still significant to a certain extent. But yeah, definitely I agree. I hope there's going to be more mining decentralization with, because as you said, like these big guys with Foundry, you can just look at mempool.space, sometimes there's like 3, 4, 5, 6 blocks in a row that are mined by the same company, which is just insane. Like these guys are really, kind of controlling the network, and if you could say so. So, I mean, decentralization is important.
Yeah, I mean, and those are the ones who can be coerced to censor some transactions in future, because still, these companies are public traded companies. They are entities that
they're
really
controlled to a certain extent. They're not cypherpunks.
Yeah, they're not cypherpunks. They basically, and the same applies for us. We are a company, of course. We can change jurisdictions, but the Foundry, if somebody just submit them like, hey guys, you need to do this and that, I would love them to say, no, we're either closing down the business or moving somewhere else. We are not following your censorship thing. I would love
what are the chances of that happening?
Yeah, that's the thing. I don't think they are super high.
And when you're so invested, there's just like...
There's hundreds, millions of dollars in these companies. So they are very invested. They are looking at the bottom line, looking at shareholders' value, which I don't think it's wrong, but it's kind of against the whole ethos of Bitcoin. So again, the future will tell. That's why I think the more smaller miners, home miners there are, I think better for the network, because we are deciding kind of at home by ourselves. You don't need to kind of listen to somebody from up telling us what we need to do.
Yeah.
So definitely helpful for the network.
I like it. And I know you don't have a crystal ball, Dushan, but like in your eyes and like everything you're doing day to day, especially in kind of in the beautiful Caribbean side of the world, how do you see kind of Bitcoin adoption evolving in the next decade? Maybe in the areas that you are basically a part of, that you've been visiting, that you've been seeing, instead of like the global world. Nobody knows what's going to happen in the global world, but like in some parts of the world, how do you see Bitcoin adoption spreading in the next 10 years? So if we're looking, let's say, to 2035.
Yeah, I'm super bullish for Central America. That's where I spend most of my time. That's where I travel. We just came from Salvador, and amazing things happening there. Plan B is going there. B Premier Bitcoin is there. So there's a lot of educational efforts already. I would love it not to depend purely on Bukele, because if he's not around for any reason, hopefully nothing happens to him.
Yeah.
I would love the Bitcoin to stay in the country because people see it as beneficial. So the education is super necessary wherever the Bitcoin came from the top down, as Salvador did. We need to kind of match it from the bottom. And it's happening. I would love the same happen to Honduras, although the country right now, it's not very friendly towards Bitcoin in general. It's kind of in a gray zone. The current government is socialist. So they don't like freedom technologies very much. They are not the best ones for this. But I would love that to change. And I see it in people, like people want it, right? So there is a certain level where population will not get pressed under certain level, and they will be more like, no, thank you, government. We will be using Bitcoin no matter what you say. So I would love to see more of that. And this is what we educate people here on, to be like more self-sovereign in their decisions. So I'm bullish for Central America. That's why we live partly here as well. And I'm helping as much as I can here, learning Spanish, paso a paso, todos los días. So I'm trying to really educate also in Spanish about Bitcoin, and that's where I'm slowly getting. And yeah, man, like this is kind of the location I really want to go in. I see a huge development in Africa happening, and I'm super bullish on that. Africa, in terms of their readiness for Bitcoin, is amazing. In terms of their kind of the colonialist history, so people really being kind of like oppressed for many years in many countries. So I think they are the ones who really, I don't want to say deserve Bitcoin, but they can benefit hugely. And we see it already in many countries happening, and the conference is springing up. So I'm super bullish on Africa. I would love to visit more countries there. So yeah, these are kind of like the two. I think Europe will be left behind because of the regulation.
Yeah.
Although Czech Republic, Slovakia are big on Bitcoin, community is growing crazily, but the regulation is slowing it down. I don't want to say that it's going to kill it, but Europe's going to be slowly left behind in this race for either mining or being Bitcoin positive jurisdiction. I don't see that. It's going to be a lot of people leaving Europe for these reasons, which so
Here's
many
one
already
as well. Gigi left earlier this year.
Gigi is one of them. So I'm already a Paraguay resident, right? I gave up my Slovak residency. So tax reasons, oppression reasons, in a way, as a Bitcoiner, you don't feel treated well in so many countries there. So this trend, I don't see it being reverted very much soon. And we will see what happens with Trump and US, because that can kind of bring a lot of Bitcoin attention there. Maybe Europe then switch a little bit of their course, because they don't want to be left behind. But yeah, there are so many forces and things happening at the same time. It's impossible to predict.
I think, like, hopefully, yes, for my friends who are still residing in the colonial European Union. But I think as the time of this recording, when it's going to be coming out in January, Mika's already going to go into effect. And Mika, to me, was kind of like this paradox where, we're building this sovereign, peer-to-peer cash system. And then Mika comes in when everybody's cheering. And I realize everybody cheering Mika does not understand the implications of Mika, where I need to be declaring who am I sending my sats or whatever crypto to, why, just like every AML anti-laundering, banking system, which I think is like way beyond cross privacy. Like you need, and then they can freeze your funds if you haven't given sufficient information. And it's just like,
it's crazy.
Guys, give me my money, where I reside now, in Russia, there is no such a concept as, proof of funds when you need to be proving someone to someone. That's a pure European thing where, everybody's just been so engrilled that they think it's the normal, that then, we'll do the same thing with digital assets. But no, guys. And going to, I don't want to shit talk Europe. Hopefully things turn around, but I want to put on a more positive spin, which you mentioned, Africa, such a big continent. There's so many countries, kind of that have gone through some of the harshest enslavings in human history. And now they're like on the brink of this freedom money. And I personally have a close relation, and, I've experienced Africa early on. I was born in Cyprus, but my first trip out of Cyprus at 11 months was to Kenya. We used to have land there, and we used to celebrate every New Year's. We would enter every New Year in Nairobi. It's like 80 kilometers away from Nairobi. It's called Malindi, this like little town on the coast. And every New Year's would go to Kenya since I was under 1 year old. And I remember growing up, they were the happiest people with the least amount of stuff. I was leaving this developed world where everybody has everything, but everybody's so depressed, everybody's in a rush. And then you go, to where people have nothing and they're the happiest people. And going to payments, I remember, the Nokia 3310s with the OG Snake on it. M-Pesa was already there. People were paying over their phones in, like, it's been 20 years now. Damn. Back in Kenya, and I was shocked, because forget mobile banking in Europe 20 years ago. Like, it was only like getting set up with like online payments, but like peer-to-peer phone payments, like to me was like future. And I was always like, being a small kid, I was thinking like, how do these guys that don't have nothing, they have such like advanced technology and they can get around it? And people like in this developed, suit worlds and, the New Yorks of the world, they need like 3 days to send an international wire. Like, how does that happen? And then when I discovered Bitcoin, I was like, wow, like if we're talking about adoption, like people that are really going to like eat this technology out are people who are basically have been, I want to say programmed, but who have been adapted to a system where, mobile payments is just normal nature. I don't know how the rest of Africa, but I know Kenya specifically, most people are unbanked and most people just do M-Pesa. They use their phone numbers to do all payments. And now, in South Africa, and I can't remember the name, but there's so many initiatives where you can basically transact Bitcoin without internet, just through GSM payments. It's fantastic, so I'm really bullish and I really hope, things go well for them, because if anything, they deserve it the most. And it's funny how like the people that need it the most are getting it first. They're not the last at the end of the shtick, but they're kind of the ones showing the example. So I think, Dushan, unfortunately, Europe is going to be kind of waving behind, and there's too much bureaucracy happening in the European Commission. And, I don't believe this, Brussels, commanding the whole 27, if other countries don't drop out, how they operate, regulations is just, it's a nightmare. And I think people are slowly getting sick, and I hope the future, I'm just finishing chapters of the sovereign individual. I really hope micronations are going to be the future ones, where we kind of decouple away from this union type of thing. But, even countries slowly break up, and there's certain, mini cities within countries where, people choose how to live their lives, how they do things. And, an example would be places like in Roatán, what you're doing, like kind of a subsystem within a system. And you guys are doing a perfect example. So once again, Dushan, like I'm really happy everything you're doing, and thank you for doing it for the humanity and the freedom tech of the world.
No, Gigi, pleasure. I mean, all these micronations and free cities, that's my huge passion as well. And that's why we ended up here in Prospera in this location, because if it wouldn't be for Prospera, this private city, I don't think I would set up the academy here. Of course, right now there is this political tension with Prospera.
Yeah, we didn't mention this. That was the reason this recording got keep delayed.
Oh yeah.
That was the thing.
We're actually waiting for some resolutions, and it's been 2 months, more than 2 months, and there was nothing official yet. So
decision pending in the mempool.
Yeah, man. So just to brief the listeners a little bit. So there is this private city called Prospera. There's one of 3 of these zones in Honduras. And basically, this was set up years ago, like in the previous government. And the current socialist government, when they came in, there was their motivation or their marketing was like, let's cancel these zones because they are expropriating land, or they are kind of selling Honduras, which is, of course, not true, but that's how socialists work. But this is unconstitutional, so they cannot cancel it. So what they canceled is that no new zones can be created. So there were 7 waiting on the line. Right now, there's only these 3 that really came up, Prospera being one of them. And right now, the court basically tries to cancel retroactively the zone. So they want to say that it was always unconstitutional. They cannot even be created. So everything is invalid. Which is, again, it's against Honduras' own constitution, against international laws. So it's against every law possible. And that's why people, even the lawyers and people from the local party, they're like, hey guys, what are you doing? Like, this is against our own laws. How can you push it? So there are these rumors, or what happened is that there were some videos leaked like 2 days before this announcement of the current government, and some family members of the president doing some deals with drug dealers and something like that. So these videos went out, and then very quickly after it, like 2 days after, there was this kind of announcement like, hey, let's focus here, let's cancel these zones. So there is kind of this conspiracy saying that it was basically just to cover up the whole story of the drug dealing and stuff. And yeah, actually what is bad for Honduras is that there is a claim between Prospera and Honduras that if Honduras retroactively against law cancels Prospera, in the international law, which basically is countries having deals with countries, there is a claim for $10 billion of damages because this is like 50 years of potential revenue and profit that are basically gone. And what is interesting that these all the countries that signed this New York Treaty, they agree on enforcing this. So that arbitration court needs to decide in a matter of 2-3 years. And it's very likely there's actually everything points to Prospera being in law, like being lawful in this sense and winning this claim. So the claim can be somewhere between 0 and 10 billion, right? Which would be very costly for Honduras. And if it would go for Prospera's sake, then basically many things, I don't know, Honduras can be cut from SWIFT, or there can be threats and cut from SWIFT. Maybe their property of Honduras, like let's say planes, can be stopped in other countries and so on. So it's a very thing that Honduras doesn't want, right? So the easiest thing for Honduras is to say like, okay, we're gonna continue, or we're gonna respect our own laws and constitution and stay to these 50 years of freedom that we designed for these zones. And once you really live on the island and speak with the local people, the village that was originally very against Prospera, very afraid that Prospera going to take their land, there's more than 50% of the people working for Prospera right now because it's the best paying jobs. They are treating the best, and they are working on something meaningful. So it's a voluntary based. People are working for Prospera voluntarily. Nobody's taking anybody's land. So there's so much fake marketing on the internet, mostly kind of this propaganda to paint Prospera as this neo-colonialists. But everything is voluntary. Prospera needed to buy the land voluntarily from people, saying like, "Hey, I would love to buy this land. How much you are willing to give?" So it's like a regular developer buying land, right? Which is normal. So, I mean, whatever you can read on the internet, it's a lot of bullshit. Once you live here and you speak to the people here, it's completely different stories that you have. And yeah, so coming back to the whole point, I'm super big fan of these free private cities, micronations. I would love to help, Prospera to thrive. We will see if this statement or the official announcement will go through. If it will be again unconstitutional. So we will see how then the government and Prospera will going to react on that. We don't know yet. But for 2 months, it's basically in the limbo. But the business continues as usual. We do education, we do coffees for Bitcoin, so everything works.
TikTok next block.
TikTok next block, exactly.
Amazing, Dushan. Well, hopefully now that I've ventured into full-time Bitcoin, I hope to visit the Latin America sometime next year. And if I go there, because it's going to be a big trip, especially from where I live now, it's not easy to travel. Definitely El Salvador was in the books, but I would love to stop by in Honduras and Prospera and see you, see things in person, how they are, and share a coffee with you with a beautiful view. It would be amazing.
Oh man, definitely. We are preparing a Bitcoin Roatán retreat for next year, finalizing the date. So it will be somewhere between March and May. So nice. Those are the best months to come. And I will send you the link, or maybe you can put the link to the Telegram group where we are putting stuff. We can put it into the podcast as well, so people can subscribe and watch.
For sure, I'd be happy to promote it on Nostr and the X page and basically get the word out. Always looking to help out fellow Bitcoiners in the space. So thank you, I guess, Dushan, to kind of round it up, essentially, what's the best place to send people that want to get in touch, follow everything you're doing with AmityAge and all the other projects? Where's the best place to find you?
So people can go to our Twitter account at AmityAge or a website, AmityAge.com. And there you can learn more about our mining. In the menu, if you choose Bitcoin Educator Academy, you can learn about the future academies across the world where we're going to have them. You can subscribe. You can participate in this 3-day intense program for educators.
We'll definitely put in the show notes, and hopefully Gigi will be joining one of those soon, because I think I need it.
Edinburgh or Italy, it's up for you. So that's AmityAge.com/BEA, Bitcoin Educator Academy. People can go there directly, and they can find me on Twitter as well at Dusan_Matuska. That's my handle. So people can reach out there, and I try to answer everything. Sometimes take a few days, but I try to answer every message.
Amazing. Well, Dushan, thank you so much for your time. I don't want to keep you any much longer. There's another tasty Mexican restaurant that's about to get onboarded to the Bitcoin ecosystem. So
in just 20 minutes.
Yeah, it's coming. And after that, some tacos and some margaritas are going to go down to be paid in sats, hopefully.
Yes.
But yeah, Dushan, thanks a lot, man, for coming on. It's been a pleasure having you on. It's been quite a few reschedulings because there was this tensions with what's going to happen with the situation in Roatán. And I send my positive vibes that, things they won't fall through, and, keep on pushing and building everything you guys are doing. And yeah, I hope in the next few months, maybe if not in Roatán, I'll see you somewhere in Europe for definitely the Bitcoin Educators Academy. That's something I'm personally interested in. I'll definitely share it in the links. Anyone listening, if you want to, essentially start teaching your communities and doing workshops, I think that's a must thing that you should do. I heard it's very intensive 3 days, but it's better to do intensive 3 days than a laissez-faire 3-month course, which probably will just go over your head. But yeah, Dushan, I look forward to having you back on the show, and best of luck, my friend.
Thank you. Anytime. Thank you, Gigi. All the best.
All the best. I hope you enjoyed this episode as much as I did recording it. I would really appreciate it if you could like, subscribe, and share this episode to help this podcast grow. Thanks for supporting the show, and until next time, stay safe and stack sats.